first of all, welcome all of you to the annual meeting of the Hanover Historical Society with a talk on literary history of New Hampshire, which we will get to shortly. Our board members will give short reports, and then our speaker will give her presentation. A full printed report is at the back of the room. And anyone who, if we run out of those, you can email me, bittingercynthia1@gmail.com, and I'll send you the report if you want it. The Board of Trustees continues to serve, and for that, we're very, very thankful. Bob Keene, who many of us very highly of, has decided to move on from the board after many years of service. And some of you remember his presentation on Keene's Lodge, which is in our website. You can get it on our website. Go to hanoverhistory.org and you can hear his story of how he and his family built up Keene's Lodge. And as you know, now it is Pierce's Inn. Okay, it moved along to the Pierces. Bob couldn't come tonight, but we will be giving him a Daniel Webster commemorative coin, as a little gift for all his service. But anyway, the board members who are serving right now, and I'll mention your name. You can raise your hand if you're here. Alan Calloway, Betsy Gonnerman, Susan Boyle, Tim Van Leer, and then ex officio, we have our back people who are representing the library, Simon and Jeff Nelsler. I'll give you a short report on what we've been up to this year. We're pleased to be able to be open this past season. Webster Cottage, which many of you have been to, is at 32 North Main, and it's really a treasure hunt for all ages. The Office of the President of Dartmouth helped us organize tours this year. So we were really happy. We got more people than ever. We wish to thank our docents, and some of them are here. Susan Boyle, Alan Calloway, myself, Sarah Bucky, Betsy McLean, and Gary Barton. I see Gary. Hi. And we thank you for helping out. There's Sarah too. We also thank Dartmouth College for its maintenance and taking care of the building and the grounds around Webster Cottage. How many of you have been to Webster Cottage? Oh, yeah. Okay, good. We want to thank Howe Library and Hanover Parks and Rec for working with us on programs this year. For example, we have other programs too. For example, one is Bill Hammond's talk. Do you remember that one? On his father's participation in World War II. If you weren't able to go to that the beginning of the year, it's on our website. He just told me the other day that he went to San Francisco to give the talk. So it's quite a popular talk. Of course, July 4th is a wonderful history day, and many of us were there. You'll see that in the report to celebrate July 4th. And Tim Van Leer, who's here, drove his historic tractor in the parade. And that was very, very fun. And families come out, really, little kids come out for July 4th. So it's a wonderful time for our town to get together. Educational projects. We do collaborate with Hanover High School, and we present a $1,000 scholarship to a top social studies student. And believe it or not, one is here tonight, Sarah Lindsay. She's shy, but she did win in 2020. Was that it? Yeah. So we're very happy to see her. And she kept her interest up in history. Yeah. Wasn't that the point of her scholarship? Courage and interest in history. She majored in history at college, correct? Yeah. And she still wants to have a historical career at some point. We like to encourage historical exploration. And we think the first children to talk to are the fourth graders, because they can really start putting things together. And we engage the World Story Exchange consultants, that's the Millers, to once again help us with our programs. And one was a study workshop at Webster Cottage. They had the children, the teachers wanted to do this. The children walked up from the Ray School to Webster Cottage, which most of you know is quite a walk. And it was like a 80-degree day that day. But they were able to do it, and they did a wonderful job studying the objects. The other project that we worked on was the interview, what we called the interview project. And you can read about it more in our report, but basically school children interviewed senior citizen activists. And both the kids and the senior citizens got a lot out of that. It was really nice. And the Byrne Foundation underwrote these efforts. Okay. The treasurer's report. Since our treasurer couldn't make it, she's with her orchestra tonight. We had an increase in donations and encourage all of you who are here to go to our website and join if you have not done already. I did notice we have some life members in the group, though. One of my friends is a life member, right? Yeah, you are. She forgot she was a life member. Pay a membership fee every year. Well, we'll talk about that. That's good. You're just giving more donations. We love those people. All right, we raised $5,200 in dues. Our current balance is $14,331. It's more than our balance last year, which was about $11,000. So we're very happy to report that we're doing well raising our money. Now, I'd like to turn to Alan, our curator, for his report, and then Tim for his report on the downtown working group and plans for our semi-quincentennial celebration. That's a long word, right? For the Declaration of Independence. And then we will introduce our program. So Alan, you want to come up and say a little bit? Tell people what you've been up to.
Yeah, I'll just tell briefly what we've been doing the past year as far as acquisition of items. One thing we're presently working on with the Hood Museum here in Hanover is that it relates to the fact that the Hood is making a change somewhat. They're going to focus more purely on visual art and divest themselves of a lot of small items, historical items and objects. And they had a long list of things that they let us see in the Historical Society, and we have been we've chosen some items, and in view of the semi-sesquicentennial coming up, we've focused on things from the Revolutionary era. And a lot of their things are things like they have a lot of powder horns, for instance, and powder horns and powder flasks, and that to me, I've been thinking about that. About the most important thing the Revolutionary soldier could do was keep their powder dry. And it's interesting to see in these early days before rubber and plastics, the way they did it, you know, and it was very important. Some battles, like the Battle of Bennington, they were preceded by heavy thunderstorms. They managed to keep their powder dry. So we're getting several powder horns and powder flasks, and other things we're getting our insignia, various types of insignia, buttons and belts and things. And Hood is going to tell us when they're going to pass these things on to us. So we hope to be doing that soon. Another thing that kind of relates to display of items that we're going to get, and also items we already have in the Webster, I like to call it Webster Museum, are some display cases that were kindly loaned to us by the Norwich Historical Society. And we're going to display some of these items we get from Hood, and also maybe other small items we already have in the cottage, so they can be more easily studied by people who come to visit us. So we're excited about that. One thing this year that got us excited, got our pulses going a while, was increased pulses. Was we thought we were going to get a writing desk actually that had been used by Daniel Webster. It was a well-preserved rosewood desk, and would have probably fitted in the cottage, but the asking price was too high, so we did not get that. In retrospect, it was probably better that this would have gone to a larger museum with better climate control, although there's a little bit better grapes in that. But in that thought. But anyway, we didn't get that. We did get another an item from Webster, courtesy of Gary Barton, and this is a snuff box that I understand there is a clear history that is dated from Webster himself.
It's indeed. Yep.
And was given to a family member and passed on, and
Exactly.
now has been donated to us, and it's in the Webster cottage right now. So we're happy to get that. As far as things in the future that we might plan on doing, we anytime from any source we would love to get letters or diaries. You know, our historical society, and we deal in objects, but you know, the human element is always good to get. So we're always on the lookout for primary source material that actually reflects how people were thinking back at the, you know, like in the time of the Revolution. So anyway, that's my report. Any comments? Okay.
They're hard to follow. So again, I'm Tim Van Leer, and new to the board, but Cindy and I have been going to monthly meetings with the downtown Hanover working group, and it's a group that is put together to try to bring Dartmouth and all of the downtown businesses a little closer together and working to create, some of the goals, I'll just read them right off, to create a more inclusive and welcoming public system, and to promote business through strategic marketing and PR initiatives, and expand public art and boost community engagement. And really trying, again, on this theme of trying to create a culture downtown that's much more welcoming, and so in that we are talking about untold stories, something that we want to, because we focus normally on a lot of history that isn't necessarily welcoming to all people, so we want to keep that in mind. So an example of some of the projects that the group is involved with is one, I don't know if you've noticed, but the Ledyard Park is the area on the east side of South Main Street where Ledyard Bank is. There's a space between Ledyard Bank and where is it bubble tea that's down there? Yeah. So you notice recently what they did do is find a unexpected full oil tank that had to be removed, which slowed the project down. And the very, very good news is that the tank didn't leak. So it's a clean setup, and things will continue to move on there. But that's going to allow us to have a little park downtown right here. We might be able to put a food truck in there, have concerts, and have a space that kids can use with their parents anytime during the day.
Is that the area that's kind of torn up now?
Yes.
Yes.
Yeah, okay.
That's
Which
good.
the beams are in the back of our
Yeah.
truck. Yep.
Nice.
So it's amazing. I have some graphics, but I didn't bring them with me. But of what they're considering to do in there, it's going to be very, very nice and very fun. The other thing is one of the things we're doing from the PR side of it is explore. If you go to Explore Hanover, so it's explorehanovernah.com. It's a new website that they've created to try to be a base of operations on the internet for Hanover downtown. So if you go on it right now, it's got a lot of events coming up, which is really helpful. And the other, let's see what else is going on. The other thing is working on some downtown art. There's a mural that will go up in Ledyard Park, but there's other things they can do as well. Again, making downtown more welcoming. I've heard people say, let's just try to make downtown cool again for the younger crowd. But again, to draw people in and and help, increase business in town. So when the businesses do well, it's fun for us, it gives us more options of places to go out to eat and things to do. And so to that, I was asked to create a tour, a walking tour for downtown Hanover, historic tour that would basically start on the green and then talk about, and I put this together, but it hasn't been put up on the website yet. I don't have those skills. I'm waiting for a student to do that. And they're busy. So, but what it would do is you would start out on the green and talk about a lot of the history that you can see in front of you. Talk about the beginnings of the town, talk about the early getting started, and then I talk about some really fun anecdotes that happened there on the way. And then other items too that are fun that I discovered that somebody might want to go and visit later, but then pull people down South Main Street, again, using the history of the buildings that would be in, and then start going into the history of some of the places like Lewis and other places that are, there's a lot of history in them. There are businesses that still are available today, and then leave people with a map and a directory of all the businesses downtown, so that they would transition maybe into spending some money. So that's the report that I created is 25 pages of, and it's a work in progress, but it's there's art in there, and there's anecdotes and all sorts of, far more than they probably wanted. But with that being said, there's some really interesting stories there that we may want to add to our website and have more there that could be used to also train docents who are giving tours. But the other thing is, actually, I'm going to keep going. One more thing. So this was really fun doing the tour. In researching the tour, I found a lot of things that I didn't know, and uncovered some things on campus that had been forgotten. For example, John Ledyard's, the famous story of the naming of the Ledyard Bridge because of John Ledyard, who was a freshman and left after freshman year, went down to the river and made a dugout canoe and paddled a 2-week trip back to Hartford to begin his career. That really then got exciting. But there's a plaque talking about that was kind of buried down there, and I found it and then cut away all the brush and exposed it. So and then going into looking for the Wheelock family grave sites in the old cemetery, I come across a far more interesting grave that very few people know about is Jenny Wentworth. And she was born a slave in 1779 to the House family in Hanover. And she married, she was in 1784, she was emancipated, and as was her to-be husband, whose name is Charles Wentworth, and not Wentworth, sorry. Oh yes, it is Wentworth. But anyway, the point is, again, these untold stories, and one of the other things that I just want to mention today is, and I think it's important, we always keep this in our mind, that we are now standing on the ground that was the Abenaki people homeland, and we definitively know that Native peoples occupied this land 12,500 years back. So, and then using this platform to kind of give voice to those who didn't have a voice and whose stories are still unknown. I just want to read some names. And these names are Exeter and Chloe, Sibby and Dina, Caesar, Billy, Fortune, and Elijah. And these are the names of the slaves who were owned by Eleazar Wheelock. And again, these are names that are not brought up often enough. And these are some of the stories that we need to uncover. And so I put it out there as a challenge to everybody, as storytellers, if you can, and researchers, if you can uncover any of these stories or any other stories that you come across, definitely send them to us because they belong.
That's something that Eliezer Wheelock had slaves.
Oh, yes, that's well known.
Really?
Yeah. But again, it's like, that's why we do this, because it's surprising. So moving on to, so Cindy and I have been going to these meetings. They've been very interesting. And we're also on a subcommittee that is putting together some activities for the 250th anniversary of the birthday of the United States. And Liz Burdett over at Parks and Rec has been heading it up. And so one of the things that Cindy has worked with is Merrick Bennett, and he creates these signs, which are little. I don't want to belittle them, but they are comic books, and they're for kids. And again, it's the untold stories of the Black revolutionaries from the area. So again, he may also possibly give a talk or a lecture for us. And then Cindy also mentioned that Ken Burns is releasing this 6-part series, The American Revolution, in November, actually coming very soon. And maybe we can do something with a showing at the Nugget or the Howe. And so there's also a thought of, because we were trying to get some reenactors. We reached out for the 4th of July celebration, and there is this coming year. So we thought maybe what we could do is try to do something around Muster Day. And so we might have better luck there. And anyway, these are things we're working on and to move forward. Do you want to mention anything about the budget that's approved by the town?
Right, we do, we're working with the town committee and we do have a budget from the Lou Brissette Fund. So we're excited about having some funding to go publicize what we work on. And some of the zines are back there if you want to see a sample. So thank you, Tim.
You're welcome.
So more on that later. Tim's working on it, Alan's working on it, and our wonderful partners back there are working on it too. So we have quite a few people working on the semi-quincentennial. And you're right, Ken Burns kicks it off a little bit for this coming Sunday. He's going to start with this American Revolution film. Now, let's turn to tonight's program. We have Mary Kronenwetter, currently teaching at Osher at Dartmouth, and has served as a museum educator at Historic Deerfield, the John Hay Estate at the Fells, and Enfield Shaker Museum. She holds a doctorate in education and has taught at colleges in the United States, China, and Japan. Mary has authored a New England-based historical novel, which I've read, Pauper Auction. So she's going to be bringing a new talk to us tonight. We're excited. Some of you got the list of the different people she's going to be talking about too. So come ahead, Mary. We're thrilled to have you here.
Can talk about the literary history of New Hampshire. When I first started doing this research, I'm like, this is interesting, but it was a little bit of a lot a bit off more than I could chew. And I'm going to talk tonight from the Abenakis to Jodi Picoult. So who are some authors quickly that come to mind for you guys when you think of New Hampshire literature? Anybody? Just holler them out.
Robert Frost.
Robert Frost. Okay, yeah.
J.D. Salinger.
Salinger. Mm-hmm.
Ernest Hebert.
Hebert, yes, American. Okay, we're going to see all of these people tonight. Did I hear any women's authors' names?
Jodi Picoult.
Besides Jodi. Okay, so let's start. Let's see how we do with this. If I turn it on. Once we get rolling, we should be fine. Okay. So I'm not going to be able to include every single author, so don't get annoyed or angry. It is a sampler designed to send you to the library and independent bookstores to explore in greater depths the literature of New Hampshire and examine it through the lens of place. So first of all, I wanted to define literature broadly to encompass any written work used to transmit culture. However, literature isn't just the written word. It can be oral tradition or visual literature, such as petroglyphs. We're going to see some of those in a moment. So I posit that all literature is literature of place. The writer and critic Jennifer Bernstein asked readers to ask the essential question of literature: how do we live? In companionship with the question, where do we live? As the great writer of place, Wallace Stegner, once said, if you don't know where you are, you don't know who you are. An author doesn't have to be a lifelong resident of a place to evoke authentic mood and tone. Robert Frost was not born in New Hampshire. Anybody know where he was born?
San Francisco.
Yeah.
Really?
Yep, spent time in Lawrence too, some of my old stomping grounds. So you can, this can be achieved, this residence of the soul. It embeds itself in the writer's heart and soul. On the other side of the equation, place not only influences literature, but literature influences the perceived identity of a place. New Hampshire cultural historian Howard Mansfield notes, visitors to New England usually arrive with a lot of baggage. They're weighed down by a lifetime of Norman Rockwell, Currier and Ives. They want nostalgia and quaintness. And I'm sure in this group, you know this Daniel Webster quote by heart. Men hang out their signs indicative of their respective trades. Shoemakers hang out a giant shoe. Jewelers a monster watch. And the dentist hangs out a gold tooth. But up in the mountains of New Hampshire, God Almighty has hung out a sign to show that there he makes men. And women. New Hampshire's rich literary history begins with the oral and pictorial traditions of the Abenaki, the people of the Dawnland, who have lived in this region, Ndakina, for over 10,000 years. Early storytelling often featured mythology starring the demigod, Muskabe. In addition to storytelling, important messages were carved as petroglyphs. So the two closest ones for Abenaki petroglyphs are Brattleboro and Bellows Falls, Vermont. I know not New Hampshire, but close. So that picture in the middle is some petroglyphs. Since the 1800s, Abenaki authors have written language primers and books of legend. Many were from the Abenaki settlement of Odanak, Quebec, also called St. Francis, which was settled by Abenaki after Abenaki communities were driven from New Hampshire and Maine by English colonists. I'm sure you all know Moore's Charity School and Dartmouth College had close ties to this community. That itself could be a subject of many hours of talking about. Here, I have used this 1884 dictionary, New Familiar Abenaki and English Dialogues, when including Abenaki in my own research and books. You will recognize these contemporary Abenaki-related works. Louise Erdrich of the Ojibwe Chippewa Nation, member of Dartmouth's first college class to admit women in 1972. She married Michael Doris of the Monadnock Nation, the first chair of the Dartmouth Native American Studies program. They wrote independently and collaboratively about the experiences of contemporary Indigenous people, and they lived in Cornish. We have Colin Calloway, British American historian in Dartmouth, who specializes in Native American history and Indian white relations in early America. And one you might not know, Dawnland Voices is an extraordinary anthology of New England Native American literature. It was published in 2014 by UNH professor Sivan Senor and includes classics and contemporary literature from petroglyphs to hip-hop poetry from 10 New England Indigenous nations. Okay, let's move to the White Mountains. A lot of this talk is organized geographically. So why is 89 and 91 so crowded in the summer? You can thank the literature and the arts depicting the White Mountains in the 1800s that inspired Americans to treasure our forests, rivers, deep valleys, mountains, and intervals. It not only inspired a romantic response, but birthed that tourist movement that we enjoy to this day. Early colonial authors writing about the White Mountains include Nathaniel Hawthorne's The Great Stone Face. He was, of course, part of the 19th century Romantic movement. Lucy Crawford wrote The History of the White Mountains, the first history of settlement in White Mountains, but actually more like her husband's biography. And the earliest guidebook was Henry Marsh's The White Mountains and Winnipesaukee Lake Guidebook, 1846. Poetry. One well-known poem was Mad River in the White Mountains by Henry Wadsworth Longfellow in 1892. And some of you might have seen some of these guys speak. Contemporary books about the White Mountains include The Last Traverse by Ty Gagney, chronicling incredible winter rescues in the White Mountains. The White Mountain by journalist Dan Szynski is an exploration of the cultural history of Mount Washington. And of course, the tradition of the White Mountain Guides continue. The AMC Mountain Guide, White Mountain Guide, is currently on its 31st edition. Okay, this was one that actually I only learned about in the last decade. Historical fiction on the gritty first settlers who came to the White Mountains at the edge of the original colonies. Most famously includes the Grand Canyon's 1942 Look to the Mountains, chronicling a young pioneer couple trying to survive in the middle of the 18th century in the foothills of Tamworth. It is one of the most popular and enduring 20th century novels. Millions of copies have been sold, and it has never been out of print. Cannon was a summer resident of Chicora, New Hampshire. I wonder if they have it on the shelves here. Probably. My local favorite, Ernest Hebert. He wrote, my favorite is The Old American, a historical fiction based on the true story of the captivity of New England house builder and farmer Nathaniel Blake during the French-Indian Wars. But he also wrote something quite a bit different, the Darby Chronicles, 7 novels covering 35 years of a fictional New Hampshire town as seen through the eyes of 3 families of various social classes. It examines the contemporary transition away from rural poverty in New Hampshire. Colonial New Hampshire, A History of New Hampshire, from the Algonquins up to the American Revolution by Dartmouth historian Jared Daniels. But before Jared Daniels, over 200 years earlier, Jeremy Belknap, a clergyman and historian, wrote the 3-volume History of New Hampshire, 1784. This work is the first modern history written by an American. Any idea if that's in your collection of Historical Society? It's like a wish list for you guys.
Yep.
This is great.
And I also wanted to mention Granite Monthly Magazine, published from 1877 to 1930. You can find it in academic and state libraries and many historical societies. I use this reference quite a bit for New Hampshire historical research and writing. And you don't feel like you have to take a picture or write everything down. Just come up afterwards and you can look at my notes. Oh, how did that get there? Pauper Auction. This is my historical fiction about early New Hampshire. Have you ever heard of a Pauper Auction? The book tells of the forgotten early New England practice of caring for the indigent of rural towns by auctioning them off at annual town meeting. It happened in Hanover. This novel illustrates a young woman's struggle to escape unexpected poverty and find autonomy and purpose in early New Hampshire. It also, I mean, we're not really near Keene right now, but it also brings to attention a fascinating and true story from Keene, Miss Fisk's Young Ladies Seminary, the nation's first girls boarding and day high school in New Hampshire, second in the country. It's really fascinating. Did you know the first known American publication by any Black person was the book Our Nig, an autobiographical novel by Milford's Harriet E. Wilson? Well, sure you did. Long thought to be the work of a white author, Wilson's 1859 novel sunk into obscurity until the early 1980s, when Henry Louis Gates republished the novel with proof that she was African American.
Where's the statue?
You know, I know it's on the African American trail that they have on the coast, but I'm not,
Oh.
I would guess it's in Milford, but
Okay.
that's a guess.
Yeah.
Because that's where she's known to be from. And this story I love. This one I can talk about for an hour too. There's a number of adult and young adult books about George Washington's escaped slave Oni Judge, including Never Caught by Dr. Erica Armstrong Dunbar. So Oni was a slave owned by the Washington family who escaped to Portsmouth from Philadelphia and was, as the title suggests, never caught. A very interesting story. I don't want to go into the details, but Washington tried to retrieve her for years, and she was never caught, but she was also never formally freed and died. She has an unmarked grave, but she did say at the time of her death, I prefer to die in abject poverty free than to be a slave. All right, we're going to talk a little bit about anthropology and ecology. We have a lot of those in New Hampshire, as you can imagine. Deep knowledge bases. So we've got my favorite, Reading the Forested Landscape by Antioch professor Tom Wessels. He's authored 4 other books as well. In A Deep Presence, 13,000 Years of Native American History, Franklin Pierce professor and archaeologist Robert Goodby presents evidence regarding Indigenous life in the Monadnock region of New Hampshire over the millennia. And by the way, he is a humanities speaker, and he is a great speaker if you're ever looking for someone to talk on that. In A Time Before New Hampshire, Story of Land and Native People, local favorite Michael Caduto illuminates New Hampshire history, starting with the formation of land 4.6 billion years ago, its evolution, the arrival of Paleo Indians, up to today's Abenaki residents and their culture. Naturalists. Again, New Hampshire is rich with naturalists sharing their knowledge of our flora and fauna. 2 examples, David Carroll, resident of nearby Warren, New Hampshire, naturalist, conservation biologist, artist, author, teacher, researcher, and MacArthur Fellow in his spare time. Cy Montgomery has written 34 books for both adults and children, and perhaps best known for The Soul of the Octopus, or The Soul of an Octopus. Although The Good Pig, memoir of her life with her pig, Christopher Hogwood, is an international bestseller. My favorite image of her is one given by the Boston Globe, describing Montgomery as part Indiana Jones and part Emily Dickinson. She lives with her husband, Howard Mansfield, in Hancock. We'll meet him in a minute. My favorite naturalist gets his own page. That's what happens when you do the talk. You can talk about who you want. Ernest Harold Baines, New Hampshire's Dr. Dolittle, an American naturalist who campaigned against the near extinction of the American bison, as you saw if you watched Ken Burns's bison documentary, his last one. Baines founded the American Bison Society with help of President Theodore Roosevelt. He served as naturalist in Corbin Park, the famous bison-filled private Victorian wildlife refuge down in Newport and Grantham toward my neck of woods. And he established one of the earliest bird sanctuaries in the nation in Meriden. They used to actually call Meriden the bird village. I do have a New Hampshire presentation on Corbin Park and one on Ernest Baines as well, if that's your cup of tea. Okay. At the start of this talk, I identified the theme of literature and sense of place. All of Howard Mansfield's books revolve around place in a conscious fashion. He's a cultural historian of history, preservation, architecture. In the anthology Where the Mountains Stand Alone, Mansfield uses essays, historical texts, and excerpts from oral history to celebrate the natural and human history of the Nodnut region. In Memory House, he identifies what collective memories make a Yankee a Yankee. That's an interesting question for around the Thanksgiving table if you're sitting with Yankees for this year. Oh, no, wait. So we're going to be now moving over to Exeter. I think I just blew that one. Who do you think was New Hampshire's first best-selling author? Hint from Exeter. Tabitha Gilman Tenney. For the first 50 years of the 19th century, she was the best-selling novelist in the country. And when I was doing this talk, I really tried to focus on some lesser-known voices, and I had never heard of her before. Her book was called Female Quixotism, Exhibited in the Romantic Opinions and Extravagant Adventures of Dorcasina Sheldon. That would not even fit on like the New York Times list of best-selling books.
Yeah.
So her 1801 novel was a critique of the popular romantic literature of the time. She displayed her feminist attitude in lines such as, quote, "Those enemies to female improvement thought a woman had no business with any book but a Bible, or perhaps the art of cookery, believing that everything beyond these served only just to disqualify her for the duties of domestic life." So this home still stands in Exeter. I think you can still visit it too. I'm sure it's part of the Historical Society. I'm not sure, but I guess. And what's wrong with? And then the big boys of Exeter. Dan Brown. Anyone read his latest book, Secret of Secrets? Just finished it. It's set in Prague. Dan Brown's best known for the Da Vinci Code, which was followed by 5 more books featuring Dr. Robert Langdon, a Harvard University professor of religious iconography and symbology. And by the way, I looked it up and there was no such major at Harvard. Although Dan Brown has only written 6 books through his career, he's currently the 20th highest seller author of all time. In 2005, he was named one of the most 100 influential people in the world, and whose editors, this is funny, whose editors credit him with, quote, "keeping the publishing industry afloat, renewed interest in Leonardo da Vinci and early Christian history, spiking tourism in Paris and Rome, a growing membership in secret societies, the ire of the cardinals in Rome, 8 books denying the claims of the novel, and 7 guides to read along with it, etc., etc., and a major motion picture franchise." John Irving. Whoops. Oh, no. I've been playing with that. Okay. John Irving achieved critical and popular acclaim for World According to Garp, The Hotel New Hampshire, Cider House Rules, A Prayer for Owen Meany, and 5 of his novels have been adapted into film. That's a pretty big number. And usually his books are set in fictional towns resembling Exeter. It's probably been a while since you've read a separate piece. High school, maybe?
Yeah.
John Knowles' 1959 novel about Phineas and Jean, students at the prep school Devon, undoubtedly Phyllis Exeter. Although Knowles wrote a dozen novels, this is the one that's synonymous with his name. Okay, children's literature. Again, we could have an entire college course on New Hampshire children's literature, but I'm going to talk about Elizabeth Yates, Peterborough. Not long after moving to Peterborough, she came across an inscription on the gravestone of Amos Fortune in nearby Jaffrey. Quote, "Sacred to the memory of Amos Fortune, who was born free in Africa, a slave in America, he purchased liberty, professed Christianity, lived reputably, and died hopefully." So she went on to research and write the biography, Amos Fortune Freeman, which won the prestigious Newbery Medal. But my favorite book of Yeats is The Sarah Witcher Story, who tells the true story about a little girl lost in the wilderness of Warren, New Hampshire in 1870 and protected by a bear. All right, I have a question for the librarians in the back. Do you still read Oxcart Man during story time sometimes? Do you know?
I'm not children's librarians. We don't know.
They do in my library. Poet laureate Donald Hall is often described as the poet of rural life and New Hampshire's natural world. However, his most famous poem, I think, is Oxcart Man, the children's book about the early 19th century yeoman farmer that won a Caldecott Medal. So it was written over 40 years ago, but I swear it is still in every New Hampshire library's children's room, and it is still used frequently in children's story times, as it should be. Let's see, do I have Tommy DiPaolo up there?
Yes.
Okay. Tommy DiPaolo, best known for his retelling of folktales. He was a prolific, award-winning children's author and illustrator of over 260 books. In 2023, the U.S. Postal System honored DiPaolo with a U.S. postage stamp featuring, who do you think they featured? Who's his most famous? Okay, yep, exactly. No. I don't usually mention personal details about authors' lives, but this one is pertinent to literature. DiPaolo was gay, but he didn't come out until later in life, telling New York Times Magazine that when he started as a children's author, quote, you'd have a big red G on your chest and schools wouldn't buy your books.
That's coming back today.
There we go. Yeah. Dr. Seuss. Theodore Geisel published over, anyone want to guess? 200. Well, no, a lot less than Tommy. 60.
Wow.
60 children's books written in rhyme under the pen name Dr. Seuss. His New Hampshire connection, as I'm sure you know, is his student career at Dartmouth. You might or might not know that the story goes that he was removed as editor-in-chief from the school humor magazine Dartmouth Jack-O-Lantern after getting caught drinking. It was prohibition time, after all. So he adopted the pen name Dr. Seuss to keep contributing to the magazine. His impact on the Alameda continues today, including first-year students participating in Dartmouth Outing Club orientation trips, eating green eggs and ham for breakfast at the Moose Lock Ravine Lodge. The Dr. Seuss book, Oh, the Places You'll Go, is a common gift for Dartmouth grads. And of course, the Dartmouth Medical School was renamed the Audrey and Theodore Geisel School of Medicine in honor of their generosity to the college. And no, I will not talk about that issue. Okay. Geisel received numerous awards throughout his career. He even had a Hollywood star on the Walk of Fame. Mm-hmm. A museum dedicated to his work in Western Mass. A Legend of Honor Medal for his animation and film work during World War II. But he never won a Caldecott or the Newbery Medal. But his birthday, March 2nd, has been adopted as the annual date for National Read Across America Day. I actually just edited this talk because I just found out this week there's actually a new Cat in the Hat book coming out. Sing the 50 United States. The manuscript was found recently in the archival materials at the Geisel Library at UC San Diego. That's your guy, right? Okay. Graphic novels, what we used to call comic books, are a popular, although mystifying to me, literature genre today. The New Hampshire Historical Society store carries a graphic novel adapted from a New Hampshire Civil War memoir found in the collections of Henniker Historical Society. No one had ever found it before. And so Marek found it and made a graphic novel of the story. And the Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles were created in Dover, New Hampshire, by Kevin Eastman and Peter Laird. So proud. And I understand this gentleman is going to be coming and doing some classes here with you guys.
Then, yes, and he's got a big project for us for 250th. So
Wow.
it's a 10. We're gonna be announcing that.
And I believe that now he's writing graphic novels featuring Black New Hampshire characters, right, from history. Cool. Oh, everyone's favorite banned books. Don't worry, this will be a PG description. Before 50 Shades of Grey, there was the scandalous Peyton Place, set in a fictional New Hampshire town, but based on Gilmanton, New Hampshire, and written by former mill worker, mother of 3, and school principal wife named Grace Metalious. It spent over a year on the New York Times bestseller list. The real life locales were Guilford, Gilmanton, Laconia, and Plymouth. Issues that were explored include a lot of them, basically all of them: abortion, incest, illegitimacy, female sexuality, teenage sexuality, class, gender, ethnicity bias, race and religion, domestic violence, suicide, physical disability, and poverty. There was a less than faithful movie adaptation of the book starring Lana Turner. Don't those characters in the movie theater look just like the town folk of Gilmanton in 1937? She actually penned 3 additional novels, was a pariah in her town, and died of cirrhosis at age 39 and in debt.
Oh, God.
She's buried in Smith Meeting House Cemetery in Gilmanton. Local favorite, Jodi Picoult. Author of 29 best-selling novels, if I have my count right. She's also one of the country's most banned authors. She's known for setting books in fictitious New Hampshire locales. Her 2017 book, 19 Minutes, is set in a town rather similar to Hanover and features a tragic high school shooting. 19 Minutes is one of the most banned books in the US, not due to the school shooting storyline, but rather for the portrayal of an explicit teenage sex scene. But, of course, it's not fair to mention Jodi Picoult only under banned books. Her most recent book, By Any Other Name, which my book club just read last month, is a meticulously researched historical fiction that supports the theory that a 16th century Jewish Italian courtesan named Emily Bassano was the author of most of the plays and poems attributed to Shakespeare. Yes. Okay, let me breathe for a minute. This is a really, really hearty lecture, and if it makes you feel any better, this was originally 3 hours that I've squished into one. Well, if you zone out, I understand, as long as you don't snore. For you poets in the crowd, New Hampshire, of course, has a rich and deep pool of poets. One that I discovered that I was not aware of was James Monroe Whitfield, a free Black born in Exeter in 1882. He was a poet, abolitionist, and political activist. In America and Other Poems, he calls out the hypocrisy of American freedom and democracy and the difficult lives of freed and enslaved Africans in the US. We have Cheryl Savageau, a New Hampshire Abenaki poet, memoirist, storyteller. Out of Crazy Woods, I've heard her speak about that book. It's a memoir of her experience living with bipolar disorder. She teaches at Bread Loaf at Middlebury. E. Cummings, Edward Estlin, published approximately, get ready for this, 2,900 published poems. And his poem is best known for its exclusion of punctuation and reliance on syntax, which is an acquired taste. He summered at Joy Farm in Madison, looking out over Chicora. The unique work of Charles Simic, a Yugoslavian emigre, has won numerous awards, including the 1990 Pulitzer Prize and the MacArthur Foundation Genius Grant, and he was named a U.S. Poet Laureate. He taught English and creative writing for over 30 years at UNH. When not writing poetry or teaching, Maxine Kuhlman could be found in Warner caring for her Arabian and quarter horses. She won the Pulitzer Prize for poetry for Upcountry, and she also served as both the U.S. Poet Laureate and New Hampshire Poet Laureate. Okay, Donald and Jane get their own separate page.
Yeah.
Donald Howe was an American poet, writer, editor, teacher, literary critic. He authored more than 50 books across several genres and 22 volumes of verse. His work often explored themes of nature, loss, and aging. And some of his most moving work, as you might know, was the prose and poetry he wrote after losing Jane to leukemia in 1994. Jane Kenyon's poetry often featured rural life and imagery, and she wrote frequently about wrestling with depression. Now here you can see the Eagle Pond farmhouse in Wilmot. They lived and wrote there circa 1800, this farmhouse, Mount Kearsarge nearby. This was Donald's grandparents' house that he inherited. And when they moved to the property, he and Jane discarded nothing from the previous generations. Their connection to this place deeply imbued their work. They've both been New Hampshire Poet Laureates, and Hall served as a U.S. Poet Laureate. So after his passing away, I don't remember what year it was, maybe 10 years ago, 15 years ago, the farm was preserved as a nonprofit by local residents who came together to save the place. And it's on the National Registry of Historic Places. So right now it hosts residencies and retreats. Okay, if anyone has an extra copy of this book, that's really on my wish list. I love that book. Robert Lee Frost is often labeled a regionalist poet due to his realistic depictions of early 20th century rural life, such as farming and using New England colloquial vernacular and native speech rhythms. Though his dialogue seems simple, he used it to examine complex social and philosophical themes. The poet and critic Ezra Pound noted of Frost's work, it had the tang of New Hampshire woods. He was awarded the Congressional Gold Medal in 1960. New Hampshire, this one actually won the 1924 Pulitzer Prize for Poetry. He won 4 Pulitzer Prizes for poetry. His Dartmouth connection. How long did he stay at Dartmouth?
About a year.
1 term. He matriculated at Dartmouth as a member of the class of 1896, but left college before the end of his first term. He returned to Dartmouth, of course, later in life as a Tickner Fellow and as a speaker in the college's Great Issues lecture series. Frost moved around quite a bit. Just a moment. All right, something like that. Let's see.
Recently, Robert Frost was portrayed by an actor down at Northern Stage.
Oh, yeah?
Yeah.
Oh, thank you. Okay. So keep that right here. Huh. Frost moved around quite a bit, writing, teaching, speaking, farming. From 1900 to 1901, they lived in the farm near Derry, New Hampshire. Later, they lived at a farm in Franconia. So the Robert Frost Farm Historical Site in Derry is now a historic house museum and New Hampshire State Park. The Frost Place in Franconia, with its view of the White Mountains, is a national historic landmark and permanent home museum for poets and poetry. There we go. Okay. I keep referring back to a sense of place in New Hampshire literature. While Frost and Hall and Kenyon focused on farms and woods, Cecelia Thaxter's inspiration came from a lifelong relationship with the Isle of Shoals. She was a poet, painter, gardener. She spent the majority of her life on the Shoals. When she was forced to move to the mainland, when she was first married, she wrote poems about her longing for home. She eventually returned to her beloved Isle of Shoals to help her aging parents as the hostess of their grand outdoor hotel. There, she surrounded herself with great poets, authors, artists, and musicians in the cottage parlor, making it a salon on Appledore Island. Appledore the hotel burned in 1914, but you can visit her reconstructed garden through guided tours. We have a really good selection of New Hampshire and United States poet laureates. But what you need to know now is that our current New Hampshire poet laureate, Jennifer Militello of Goffstown. New Hampshire has a very active poetry society. And I wanted to briefly talk about Cornish. You guys are probably experts in this. The Cornish colony, or as was once described as an aristocracy of brains, was one of the first arts colonies in the US, beginning with sculptor Augustus St. Gaudens in 1885. It grew to include all creatives, including writers who were inspired by the natural beauty of the river valley and Mount Ascutney. This is a huge topic, so I recommend Footprints of the Past, you guys probably know, by Virginia Reed Colby and James E. Atkinson. It's a very good history. I'm also going to mention only two of Cornish authors. Have you ever heard of Winston Churchill, the author?
Yeah.
Yeah. He was very popular. His works, such as the New Hampshire-based novel Coniston, often had political themes. Churchill's Cornish house, Harlockenden, was the summer White House for Woodrow Wilson and his family. And a cute story is that he and the British Winston Churchill became aware of each other in 1900 when books by the English Churchill began to appear alongside the well-established American Churchill. So prominent was the American novelist at the time that English Winston wrote him a polite letter promising to use his middle name Spencer to distinguish himself from the far better known American. The English Winston, as we all know, went on to become Prime Minister in 1940 and led Britain to victory in World War II. J.D. Salinger, Manhattan-born author, notoriously went into hermit-like seclusion in Cornish soon after the publication of his best-selling 1951 novel, The Catcher in the Rye. He pleaded with his fans, why can't my life be my own? He requested that he not be forwarded any mail and that fans should not write him. His published works include the one novel and 3 volumes of stories. As you probably know, The Catcher in the Rye is a manifesto of disenchanted youth. Mark David Chapman had the book when he was arrested for killing John Lennon. The book was also found in John Hinckley's hotel room after he was arrested for attempting to assassinate President Reagan. It is one of the most frequently censored books across the nation, and simultaneously, the second most frequently taught novel in U.S. high schools. I don't know how that math works, but I know I had to read it. Okay, I do love the Upper Valley, but I really love the Monadnock region. Hundreds of painters, poets, writers, composers, choreographers, and photographers have looked to Mount Monadnock for inspiration. Ralph Waldo Emerson used the mountain to explain the transcendentalist view of nature and called it the New Olympus. Nathaniel Hawthorne described it as a sapphire in the sky. And Henry David Thoreau wrote, that New Hampshire bluff, that promontory of a state, will longest haunt our dreams. Has anyone ever got into the McDowell colony?
Not yet.
I will tell you how to do so. They no longer call it McDowell Colony. Now it is called McDowell, since just a few years ago. McDowell was once described as the most creatively prolific 400 acres in America. It's the oldest and among the largest artist residencies programs in the U.S. Founded in 1907 by pianist Marion Nevins McDowell and her husband, composer Edward Alexander McDowell, at their summer home. They wanted to create a sanctuary and share their Monadnock inspiration. Former writers have ranged from James Baldwin to Jonathan Franzen. There are now 40 buildings on the site, including 28 artist studios, notably none within hearing distance from each other. Now, this is how you get in. If you write, yeah, you can do that, but if you're not going to get in as a famous author, the Edward McDowell Medal is awarded each year since 1960. This event held each July is open to the public and it's free. They open the doors and it's the only chance most of us have of getting in. So I'm hoping to try that. One well-known and frequent McDowell Fellow is Thornton Wilder, best known for Our Town. He wrote while in residence at McDowell and then supposedly based the fictional world of Grosvenor's Corner on Peterborough, McDowell's hometown. Although I was in Peterborough recently giving this talk, and they were arguing with me about other, like Joffrey was trying to take credit and other towns. So I say, might be the inspiration. Our Town did win the Pulitzer Prize, and it said that Our Town is performed at least once a day somewhere in the United States, and it continues to be performed around the world. You can take a walking tour of Peterborough, the Our Town. Jaffrey is the home of the old burial ground where Willa Cather and her partner Edith Lewis are buried. They spent many years there, and Willa Cather wrote books such as My Antonia, and she used her time in Jaffrey as it was a restorative place for her, something her busy and parallel life in New York seldom allowed. So is Willa, and we could ask ourselves, is Willa Cather a New Hampshire author? I'm not expecting an answer, but just something to think about. Okay, pop quiz. According to its publisher, located in Dublin, New Hampshire, still the Monadnock region, was the oldest continually produced periodical in the U.S. Every single one of you know this one. Yes.
Oh, that's right.
Yes, it is the Old Farmer's Almanac.
Oh, okay.
At least I used to say, if you don't know what the answer to this is, get out. And so many people didn't know, so I stopped saying that. So the Old Farmer's Almanac has been published continuously since 1792. Yankee Publishing now currently publishes it. Speaking of which, Yankee magazine was established in 1935 when Rob and Trick Sagendorf decided New England needed a magazine for Yankee readers by Yankee writers. Remember I was talking about that whole nostalgia thing? Mm-hmm. So Yankees had, in my opinion, a very big role in shaping, how we still think nostalgically about New England. Has anyone read The Bear? So this, most recently, From the Shadows of Mount Monadnock, comes the novel The Bear, 2020, by part-time Jaffrey resident Andrew Krovac. It was an NEA Big Read and a New Hampshire Humanities Big Read. I chose this book to facilitate my book club last year. I had reservations about it because it was described as a post-apocalyptic fiction, a phrase often associated with zombies. And I've nothing against zombies, but I wasn't going to bring zombies to a book club. But no zombies. It's all set in the woods. It's beautiful. It's described in the Big Read as a cautionary tale of human fragility, of loss and love, a stunning tribute to the beauty of nature's dominion, and explores powerful themes about the importance of intergenerational storytelling, our complicated relationship with the environment, and how to prepare for an unknown future. And the setting is the wilderness around Mount Monadnock. We all loved it. Okay, so do you want to hear a little bit about New Hampshire libraries, or are we good? Do we want to talk? What's your opinion?
New Hampshire libraries?
Yeah,
Sure.
full of slides. This is actually my favorite part.
Okay.
No pressure. So Peterborough, the place I'm talking about, is the home to the first free tax-supported public library in the nation, founded at town meeting in 1833. Have you, I'll go back a minute. Okay. Have you ever noticed that some of the libraries in New Hampshire are called free libraries? Yeah. Grantham Free Library, Pillsbury Free Library, Richards Free Library. In my town, Grantham Library was established in 1901 by Lorenzo Dunbar, who donated the land and built the structure as a town and women's meeting room and library in memory of his life. And this free public library movement began in 1849, when New Hampshire legislature authorized towns to levy taxes for the support and establishment of public libraries. The term free library was used in the late 19th and 20th centuries to differentiate libraries that were open to the public versus the subscription libraries. So here, just this beautiful picture, that is Pillsbury Free Library in Warner, and it was donated by George A. Pillsbury of flower fame. This is what I mean by subscription library. The Portsmouth Athenaeum, if you have not been to this in Portsmouth, you have got to go. It was founded in 1817, predating public libraries. And of course, these were created in the 18th century for the mutual edification of its members and to elevate the educational resources available to its members. While there were once hundreds of membership libraries across America, there are now fewer than 20 left, and one of them is in Portsmouth. It's just that narrow building right there. So if you're not a member, you can still go in for lectures and tours and so on. It's really fascinating. It's just in the middle of downtown Portsmouth. My favorite library? No offense, Howe. I didn't realize librarians would be in the room. My favorite New Hampshire library is the Richards Free Library in Newport. It's an 1890 colonial revival style mansion that was donated to the town, a free library by the Richards family. And every room has a fireplace that has all the original art and furniture and architectural details. Absolutely gorgeous. There's a New Hampshire history archive on the upper floor that I use quite a bit. But my favorite part, library cats. There's two that wander around and they're very friendly. And I'm not allowed to have one, so I'm not going there. Most importantly, the library honors the legacy of Newport resident Sarah Josepha Hale, America's most powerful 19th century woman of letters. She authored books and poems like Mary Had a Little Lamb and successfully petitioned President Lincoln to proclaim Thanksgiving a federal holiday. But even more importantly, in my opinion, as an editress of the Ladies Magazine and Goodies Lady Book, she shaped the opinions of American women for 40 years through her editorials on women's education and political consciousness. And this one is up on the second floor. Every person who's been awarded the Sarah Josepha Hale Award has one of those plaques up there. The award's given every year to an author or artist from New England. First recipient, Robert Frost. Rauner, you could probably tell me more. It holds, of course, extensive White Mountain collections, Robert Frost papers, Theodore Geisel's papers, as well as Cornish colony collections. And of course, anyone can visit and make use of this incredible resource. You do not have to be a Dartmouth student. Okay, so I think you guys all know your New Hampshire independent bookstores, very precious.
Mhm.
And the fact that you have so many in this within a 20-mile radius is incredible. New Hampshire, NPR has NHPR Reads, Writers on a New England Stage, Author on Maine. This New Hampshire Book Festival, of course, we also have the Woodstock one, but it's not New Hampshire. Bookstock, but New Hampshire, the New Hampshire one's in Concord in October. It just restarted a few years ago. Okay, I'll skip that one. So I think that's where I'm going to end up. That last one was just talking about how you can also visit a lot of these places too, not just the Frost House, but you can go to Gilmanton and go past Grace Metalious' house. There's so many different places that you can go to. But at the beginning of this talk, I spoke about how literature is influenced by place, while conversely, place is shaped by literature. What do you think of that? And what books might you recommend that really bring to you a sense of place? Okay, and of course, I'll take some questions. Thank you. Thank you for your amazing. What do you think? Or do you have questions? Yes.
Do you know New London, New Hampshire? I just remember it because it's always had its old library, and I went there as a child, and it's like in the middle of the town, and it's like a real part of New London.
Yeah, it's
Do you know New
beautiful.
London?
It is,
Which library?
the new London Library.
Yes.
Yes, and they also have a garden there too, that
A
they do a
garden,
lot of
yeah.
things with, yeah. So, and of course, they have the Tommy DiPaolo room there,
Oh, they do.
and they actually, Newport also has the Tommy DiPaolo children's room too. So yeah, really beautiful. Yes.
Have you read,
Library?
have you read Unlikely Animals by Annie Hartnett?
Yes.
Okay.
We can talk later.
Speaking of Newport.
Well,
It's-
you know, I've written a lot of historical things about Ernest Baines.
Yeah.
And it is a magical realism book, kind of. It's based on a very important issue, which is community and the fighting of the opioid epidemic. But for some reason, they have the ghost of Ernest Baines in there. It's the side character. It's just other questions. Yes.
Don't you think New Hampshire, like Vermont, was a wonderful second home location? And that's why, I mean, in my research, because I'm more a Vermont historian, so many wonderful, talented people came up for their summers, not usually winters, but for their summers, and had a summer house and did their writing
Yeah.
up in this area. And that's, I think, one reason why we have so many, because they spent part-time
Absolutely.
up in this area. And you go way back in time into the early years where tourism was just starting and having a second home. And the homes up here in those days were very inexpensive. And so they came up and were able to just come for a short time in some cases and do their writing and then return to more populated areas. How do you feel about that?
I think that that's absolutely a really big contributor why we have such a rich literary tradition in the state. I think too about when I was listening to, I was thinking about the summer home movement when so many people started coming up here, not just for the White Mountains, but for the lakes as well. And John Hay, for example, at the Fells, he built this big estate from farms. Might or might not have been abandoned. And he wrote his 10-volume biography on Lincoln. He wrote his poems. And his son became a nature writer who kind of grew up at the Fells and wrote 12 books of nature. So I do think that, you know, as I said, even if New Hampshire isn't your full-time address, can you still be a New Hampshire writer? I think yes. Yeah.
But that was where you had your inspiration. That's where you could take a time out
Yeah.
from other activities.
Yeah.
And some brought people with them and had like parties and all kinds of stuff.
Salons, yeah.
And others, I guess, were more reclusive.
Well, and in the early years too, it was mostly men, like clergymen, who had the luxury of not working in a mill 6 days a week. You know, the early writers were often people who could afford it because they weren't working like that. Yeah. Excellent. Thank you. Yes.
How is the issue of trying to control books about race and so on impacting libraries and schools in the state?
Well, that one is, as a historian looking back, I don't talk that much about banned books and what's happening today. I would love to be able to tell you these are the resources to go and fight those bans, but I am not the person to give. Is there anyone in this room that can give you an update on? I mean, it's not new. I did last Tuesday. I was very encouraged because the mothers groups that were trying to ban books they lost their school board seats in every single state where they were running. I just saw an article about that. But you know, there's only I'm sure this library, you probably put out a banned books exhibit, do you, upstairs? Yeah. Yeah. There's always going to be banned books, and it's just something that we have to just have constant, you know, diligence about. But then again, you think about banned books too. I'm just playing devil's advocate. Would you want a book on a glowing history of how wonderful the Nazi Party was on the shelf? So, you know, it's hard. Yeah, I don't have an answer for you. I'm sorry.
I have to tell you, when my mother read Peyton Place.
Yeah.
And she hid it from the rest of the family. And I found it like buried under under her dressing table. It had sort of a fabric around it. It was in a shelf and
That reminds me, my father found my sister had a copy of Looking for Mr. Goodman, Mr. Goodbar, right? That was the only time I ever saw
Other questions, memories?
Oh, do you think this will keep going? Because now you showed us some graphic novels. You we know that in the nation out there, there's less reading of books than we used to have. So do you think we'll still keep going with this book thing?
Well, I mean, I'm always so surprised and thrilled that historical fiction, for example, is such a huge popular genre still.
Okay.
So I mean, now a lot of people will read a podcast, listen to a podcast instead of reading a book. But if they can get information, say if it's a podcast like NPR's, the Bear Brooks mysteries and all those kind of things. If you can learn something from other media sources, it's okay. Am I disappointed? But you can't even keep up with all the books that are being published anymore. It's a tidal wave. And children's books too. So I thought that the Kindle would kill the book or podcasts would kill the book or blogs online would kill the book, but the book is still here. So. Well, thank you all for coming. If anyone wants to chat longer, please come on up.